Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Sunday, March 1st, 2026. And today we are talking about freedom.
Yeah, but not the abstract kind.
Right, not the eagle soaring kind of freedom. We are talking about something much more specific, much more boring, honestly, and yet much more impactful for the people involved. We're talking about bureaucratic freedom.
Exactly. The difference between being stuck in this permanent legal limbo and actually being able to build a life here.
Exactly. I'm your host, and sitting here with me is our resident immigration policy expert, and we've got a really fascinating mission for this deep dive today.
We really do, because this date, March 2026, it's going to go down in the history books for a very specific group of people.
Specifically, international researchers, scientists, scholars, basically anyone navigating the U.S. immigration system on a very particular visa.
The J-1 visa.
Yes, the J-1. Now, if you're listening to this, you might know the J-1 is the exchange visitor visa. It's branded really nicely.
It sounds incredibly friendly.
It does. Cultural exchange, student interaction, come see America. But there is a trap door built into this visa that has terrified international students and researchers for decades.
Right.
And it is called the 2-year home residency requirement.
Or as the immigration lawyers and the people actually stuck in the system like to call it, the golden handcuffs.
The golden handcuffs. That is the perfect term for it. It's officially known as Section 212E. And essentially, the deal has always been come to the U.S., learn our skills, get our training, use our labs, but then you must go home.
Right. You have to go back to your home country for 2 full years to share that knowledge before you can ever work in the U.S. long term.
It's basically a forced export of knowledge.
It is. And for years, that was an ironclad rule. You sign the paper, you take the ride, you pay the price.
But something massive has shifted recently.
It has. We have a huge stack of sources here today. We've got case studies, regulatory updates from late 2024, advisory guidelines, and they paint a completely new picture as of today.
It really is a landscape shift. We're looking at a story of retroactive liberation for thousands of people, and at the same time, a continued complex nightmare for others.
Yeah, the contrast is wild.
So let's make this real. I want to start by introducing you to a case study from our files to really anchor this. Let's call her Nadia.
Nadia is the perfect example to start with because she represents the absolute best case scenario in this new world.
So picture this. Nadia is a researcher from Saudi Arabia. She's been in Boston for the last 3 years doing just incredible work in a biotech lab.
On a J-1 visa.
Exactly, on a J-1. And for those 3 years, she has been operating under a heavy cloud. She knew, deep down, that the moment her program ended, she had a plane ticket waiting for her back to Jeddah.
Not because she wanted to leave right then.
No, not at all. But because the law said she literally had to physically reside in Saudi Arabia for 2 years before she could even apply for a work visa, like an H-1B or a green card.
That's the standard 212V situation. She was subject to the rule. Her career in the U.S. had a hard ceiling. She could see the ceiling, she could touch it.
Until this week.
Right.
Because as of right now, March 2026, Nadia is effectively free.
She doesn't have to go back.
No. She could apply for that work visa tomorrow if she wants. So the mission for this deep dive is to answer why. How did Nadia escape the golden handcuffs without actually leaving the country?
And why are other people who are sitting right next to her in that exact same lab still stuck?
Exactly. And it comes down to a mix of 3 specific triggers. A massive government update that happened back in December 2024, and the incredibly fine print of who pays your bills.
The fine print is always where they get you.
Always. So let's unpack this, because this is a huge deal for anyone in the international community. Let's start with the why behind Nadia's sudden freedom. This takes us back to late 2024. What actually happened?
So what happened was the skills list revolution. To really grasp this, you have to understand trigger number 1 of the J-1 handcuffs, which is the skills list.
Trigger number 1. Okay. What is this list exactly? I mean, is it a physical list?
It is a literal list published in the Federal Register. And here is how it works. Every country in the world has the right to tell the U.S. Department of State, hey, we are short on people with these specific skills.
Like we need more engineers.
Right. We are short on civil engineers, or we are short on geneticists or urban planners.
So it's basically a do not keep list. The home country is saying, if one of our citizens comes to you to study this topic, you have to send them back to us when they were done.
Exactly. And for decades, that list was just stagnant. It was dusty. I mean, some countries had skills on there that weren't even relevant to the modern economy anymore.
I can imagine.
But in December 2024, the U.S. Department of State did something they hadn't done in 15 years. They revised the list.
And when you say revised, you don't just mean they fixed a few typos or changed computer repair to IT services.
No, this was a slash and burn revision. They removed 37 countries from the list entirely.
37 countries. That is a massive chunk of the globe.
It is. We are talking about major sources of talent. Saudi Arabia, as in Nadia's case, they are off the list. India, Brazil, these are countries that send tens of thousands of scholars to the U.S.
Wow.
And overnight, the U.S. government and these foreign governments just agreed, we aren't going to enforce this requirement based on skills anymore for these nations.
Okay, so let's get technical for a second here. If I'm listening to this and I'm from one of those countries, or maybe a country that wasn't removed entirely but had the list shortened,
Right.
how do I know if my specific skill was the problem? Like, how does the government actually know what I studied?
That is the million-dollar question. It all comes down to a code. If you look at your J-1 paperwork, that form DS 2019, there is a section called Subject Field Code.
Okay.
It looks a lot like a library Dewey Decimal Number. It's called a CIP code.
CIP code?
Yeah, Classification of Instructional Programs. It
Yeah.
would be something like 26.01001 for biology.
Got it.
The government takes that code from your paper and cross-references it with the skills list for your country. If your code is on the list, you are trapped. If it's not, you aren't.
So before December 2024, Nadia's code for biotechnology was definitely on the list for Saudi Arabia.
Correct.
But now, Saudi Arabia has no list, so her code connects to nothing.
Precisely. The connection is entirely broken. And this brings us to the most surprising part of this whole update, which is the retroactivity.
Yeah, let's clarify the timeline here, because this happened in December 2024. Nadia came here in 2023.
Right.
And usually, laws don't look backward. You sign a contract under the old rules, you stick to the old rules.
That is usually how the law works. But with the skills list, the Department of State's guidance is incredibly generous. They have explicitly stated that if your country is removed from the list, or if your specific skill code is removed from your country's list, the requirement is retroactively eliminated for you.
That is wild. It's like a get-out-of-jail-free card that just magically appears in your pocket.
It really is. The logic they're using is basically, if your home country doesn't want you back for that skill anymore, why should the U.S. government force you to go?
What?
The justification for the restriction has evaporated, so the restriction evaporates too.
So Nadia is sitting in her lab in Boston. In 2023, she's looking at the regulations thinking, I'm stuck. The list changes in late 2024. And suddenly, that chain is just gone.
Gone, as if it never existed in the first place. She can walk into an interview for a permanent job in Chicago or New York, and when they ask, do you have work authorization restrictions, she can now effectively say, I can fix that.
I can only imagine the emotional weight of that. You go from planning a 2-year detour in your entire career to suddenly having the doors to an H-1B or a green card just swung wide open. It's totally life-changing.
It is. For people from India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, this was a moment of massive relief. And this is the crucial but that we really have to focus on today.
Yeah.
This only solves the problem if the skills list was the only reason you were stuck.
Right. And this brings us to the dark side of the moon here. The people who didn't get the confetti and the champagne. We need to talk about the other traps. Let's bring in another case study from the sources. Let's talk about Stephen.
Poor Stephen.
Yeah.
Stephen is also a J-1 holder. Let's say he is also from a country that got removed from the list. Maybe he's from Brazil. So logically, he thinks he should be celebrating just like Nadia.
Right. His country's off the list.
But Stephen isn't celebrating because he is still subject to the 2-year rule. He still has to go home.
Why? If the list changed, why is Stephen still trapped?
Because the skills list is only trigger number 1. Stephen walked right into trigger number 2, which is government funding.
The money trail.
A money trail. And this is the strictest, most unyielding trigger of them all. The rule is incredibly simple and incredibly harsh. If any part of your exchange program was funded by the U.S. government or your home government, you are subject to the 2-year return rule. Period.
When you say any part, are we talking about a full ride scholarship? Like they paid his tuition, his rent, his food?
I'm talking about the $1 rule.
$1.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Theoretically, yes. If you received a travel grant for $500 that came from a government source, you're subject. If the government bought your plane ticket, you're subject.
That seems incredibly punitive for just a plane ticket.
It is. And here's where it gets really tricky and where you as a listener really need to pay attention. Sometimes you don't even know you are government funded.
Wait, how can you not know who is paying you?
Because of indirect funding. Let's say Stephen is a research assistant at a big university. The university pays his salary. He looks at his pay stub and it says University of California or whatever.
Right.
He thinks, great, the university is paying me. That's private money. I'm safe.
Makes sense.
But where did the university get that specific pot of money? Maybe that specific lab is operating on a grant from the National Science Foundation or the Department of Energy or the Department of State, and maybe that grant was specifically tagged for international exchange.
So the money originated from the government, passed through the university, and landed in Stephen's pocket. And that counts.
That counts. If the purpose of the grant was international exchange, it counts. He is now officially government funded.
That is a trap. He might not find that out until he tries to apply for a green card literally years later.
Exactly. And the most famous clear-cut version of this funding trap is the Fulbright.
Oh, the Fulbright program. I mean, it's prestigious. It's the gold standard of exchange.
It is, and it is a guaranteed set of golden handcuffs. The Fulbright program is the flagship of cultural diplomacy. The whole point of the program is the U.S. taxpayer pays for you to come here, you learn about America, and then you go home and tell people, hey, Americans are actually pretty nice.
It's a transaction. We buy your goodwill, but the return on investment actually requires you to return.
Exactly. If you come here on a Fulbright and stay in the U.S. forever, the diplomacy failed. The taxpayer didn't get their ROI. So the funding trigger is almost impossible to shake just by a change in the skills list. It doesn't matter if Stephen's country is off the list. The funding trigger is separate. It stands completely alone.
Okay, so that's trigger number one, the skills list, which is fading away for many, and trigger number two, funding, which is permanent. But our notes mention a third trigger, and this one seems kind of automatic.
Yeah, trigger number 3 is graduate medical education. This is for the doctors.
So if I come here to do my residency or a fellowship?
If you come to the U.S. on a J-1 to receive graduate medical education or training, you are automatically subject to the 2-year rule.
Okay.
It doesn't matter who paid. It doesn't matter where you are from. You don't even need to look at a list.
Why? Why are we singling out doctors?
It's a mix of ethics and protectionism, really. The U.S. has arguably the best medical training in the world. We invite foreign doctors to train here, but there is a massive global fear of brain drain. If every doctor from a developing nation came to the U.S. for training and then just stayed in Manhattan or Beverly Hills to make a fortune, their home countries would be left with absolutely no doctors.
So the U.S. law fundamentally views foreign medical graduates as a resource that needs to eventually return to their home countries to improve global health.
Exactly. The Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates, the ECFMG, they sponsor these visas, and they are very strict. If you are a J-1 doctor, you have the handcuffs. It is inherent to the category of the visa itself.
So let's zoom out for a second here. We have a situation where the landscape is split. You have the Nadias, who are suddenly free because of the 2024 skills list update. And you have the Stephens with the funding and the doctors with the medical training who are still looking at a 2-year flight home.
Correct.
Now, I want to pivot to what that flight home actually means, because I think there's a huge misconception here. I've heard people say, oh, I'm subject to the 2-year rule, I'm banned from America, I can't enter.
That is the biggest myth we need to bust today. If you take absolutely nothing else away from this deep dive, take this. Being subject to Section 212E does not mean you are banned from the United States.
So let's decode the 2-year rule. If Stephen is subject, does he have to leave the U.S. and never set foot on American soil for 730 days?
No, absolutely not. The 2-year home residency requirement is very specific about what it forbids. It does not forbid entry. It forbids change of status to specific visa categories.
Okay, let's list the forbidden fruits then. What can Stephen not do?
He cannot get an H visa. So the H-1B, which is the standard work visa everyone wants, that is blocked. He cannot get an L visa, which is for intra-company transfers. And most importantly, he cannot get a green card or permanent residence. He cannot adjust his status to become an immigrant.
So the path to staying here permanently is blocked. He can't settle down.
Correct. You cannot immigrate. However, you can visit. Stephen can go home, spend a month there, and then come back to the U.S. on a B1 or B2 tourist visa to attend a conference. He can come visit friends. He could even come back on an F1 student visa to do another degree.
Wait, really? So he could go home, turn right around, come back as a student, and that's legal?
It is perfectly legal. We see it all the time. Someone finishes a master's on a J1, goes home for a week, and comes back on an F1 for a PhD.
But does that solve his problem?
No, and here's the catch. That time he spends in the U.S. as a student does not count toward his 2-year requirement.
The clock stops.
The clock stops entirely. The requirement is that he must be physically present in his country of nationality or last legal residence for an aggregate of 2 years. If he is in the U.S., he is not in his home country. So the clock is paused.
You use the word aggregate. That feels like a key legal term.
It's the math of the 730 days. It does not have to be consecutive. And this is something many people miss. You don't have to serve a continuous 2-year sentence like a prisoner. You can chip away at it.
Break that down. How would that look in practice?
Let's say Stephen moves back home. He works there for 6 months. That's roughly 180 days on the clock. Then he gets a fellowship in London for 6 months.
Clock stops.
Right, the clock stops because London isn't his home country. Then he goes back home for another year. That's another 365 days. Then he comes to the U.S. for a summer program. Clock stops again. He just has to keep adding up the days he is physically in his home country. Once the total hits 730, he is free.
That sounds flexible, but also like a nightmare to track.
It is a logistical nightmare because here is the thing. The burden of proof is on you. When Stephen finally applies for his green card 5 years from now, the U.S. government is going to say, prove you're in your home country for 730 days.
How do you prove that?
You become a hoarder, you need a shoebox, or, a very organized Google Drive full of evidence. We're talking boarding passes. Passport stamps are good, but they are often faint or hard to read. So you need credit card statements showing you bought coffee in your home city on specific dates, utility bills, employment records, cell phone location data.
You literally have to reconstruct your life day by day.
Yes. If you can't prove a day, the government simply won't count it. So aggregate is a great feature, but it requires serious discipline.
Okay, so Stephen has options. He can serve the time, he can chip away at it. But let's be honest, most people who build a life in the U.S., who have apartments, friends, maybe romantic partners, they don't want to leave for 2 years. They don't want to leave for 2 months.
Right.
They want a loophole. They want a waiver.
And that brings us to the escape hatch.
Let's introduce another character from our source material, Amir. Amir's looking out for a friend, and he's asking about waivers. Now, I see there are 5 different types of waivers in the regulations. Persecution waivers, hardship waivers. That seems like a lot of options.
It's an illusion of choice. There are 5 types, but for 90% of the people listening to this deep dive, there is only one that matters. The no objection statement.
The no objection statement. This sounds exactly like what it is.
It's very literal. It is the most common path. Here is how it works mechanically, because people often get the order of operations wrong.
Walk us through the steps.
Step 1, you file a request with the U.S. Department of State to get a case number. You need to be in the system. Step 2, you go to your home government, specifically their embassy in Washington, D.C. They usually have a specific desk or officer for this. You ask them to write a formal letter to the U.S. Department of State.
And what does the letter actually say?
The letter basically says, we, the government of country X, have no objection to this person staying in the U.S. and not returning home. We release them from the requirement.
That makes a lot of sense. If the whole point of the rule is to protect the home country's brain drain, and the home country says, we don't mind, then why should the U.S. care?
Precisely. It's a triangular communication. The embassy talks to the U.S. State Department. The State Department reviews it. If they agree, they send a recommendation to USCIS, which is the Immigration Service, and USCIS grants the waiver.
So if you get the home country to say yes, is it a done deal?
Usually. If your trigger was the skills list, or if you had funding from your home government, the U.S. generally accepts the no objection letter. They figure, it's your money, it's your citizen. If you don't care, neither do we.
But I feel a but coming.
But it doesn't work well for everyone. Let's go back to trigger number 2, U.S. government funding.
Ah, the Fulbright.
Right. If the U.S. taxpayer paid for your exchange, the U.S. State Department is much less likely to care what your home country thinks. You can get a no objection letter from your embassy, and the U.S. State Department can still say, objection denied, we paid for this, go home.
So the no objection route is really risky if the U.S. government footed the bill.
It's very difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. And what about the doctors?
Right, Zahir. Can Zahir just get a letter from his country?
He can get the letter, but the U.S. will almost certainly reject the waiver request based on no objection.
Why? Even if his country says they don't need him?
Yes. Because of that secondary policy goal regarding medical graduates, the U.S. is extremely strict about not being seen as a poacher, so a simple no objection letter is rarely sufficient for medical graduates.
So what can Zahir do? Is he just stuck?
He has a specific escape hatch called the Conrad 30 waiver.
Conrad 30. That sounds like a spy novel or a thriller.
It does, doesn't it? It's named after Senator Kent Conrad. And the deal is this. The U.S. has a massive shortage of doctors in rural and underserved areas. We have vast stretches of this country where there are simply no physicians, so the government makes a trade with Zahir.
A quid pro quo.
Exactly. They say, okay, we will waive your requirement to go home. You don't have to leave. But you must agree to work in a federally designated health professional shortage area, an HPSA, for 3 years.
So he has to go work in rural Kansas or inner city Detroit or the Mississippi Delta.
Correct. And he has to work full-time, usually in primary care or a specialty that is severely needed. If he completes the 3 years, he gets the waiver. He gets the green card path.
It's interesting. It connects the 2-year rule to the broader picture of the U.S. healthcare crisis. We use foreign talent to fill the gaps that American doctors often just don't want to fill.
Immigration is always social engineering at its core. It's about incentivizing behavior. For Zahir, it's a job, but it's also his ticket to freedom. And honestly, without the Conrad 30 program, many rural hospitals in America would just shut down.
So waivers exist. They are possible. But here's the part that scares me looking at the 2026 data, the timeline.
The timeline is the silent killer. In 2026, the bureaucracy is struggling. Waiver decisions are taking 6 to 12 months.
That is a long time to wait in complete uncertainty.
It is, but there is a strategic risk here that is even more dangerous than the wait itself. We call it the point of no return.
This sounds ominous.
It is. Here's the trap. You are on a J-1 visa. It has an end date. You decide to apply for a waiver because you want to stay. The moment the Department of State issues a favorable recommendation for your waiver, you can no longer extend your current J-1 status.
Wait, let me get this straight. I apply for the waiver because I want to stay. The government says, yes, you can have a waiver. And because they said yes, my current visa becomes non-renewable.
Correct. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's strict legal logic. The J-1 is a non-immigrant visa. It is strictly temporary. By applying for a waiver, you are signaling immigrant intent. You are telling the government, I'm done with the exchange, I want to stay forever.
I see.
The moment the government agrees to that waiver, you are no longer eligible for the temporary J-1 benefit.
So let's play out a disaster scenario here. Say my J-1 expires in 2 months. I apply for the waiver today. I get the recommendation next month. Now I have 1 month left on my visa. I can't extend it. But I haven't lined up my H-1B work visa yet.
You basically fall off a cliff, legally speaking. You have a waiver, so you don't have to go home for 2 years, but you have no underlying visa status to keep you in the country right now. You might have to leave immediately.
That is a high-stakes poker game. You painted yourself right into a corner.
It requires perfect timing. You need to ensure you have enough time left on your J-1 to bridge the gap to the H-1B, but you also need to start the waiver early enough to actually get it approved. It's a needle that is very hard to thread.
So for anyone listening who is thinking, I'll just apply for a waiver, no big deal, you really need to look at the calendar.
You need a strategy, not just a form. You need to know exactly when your current status ends and exactly how long the H-1B processing will take.
Okay, we've covered the freedom of the skills list, the trap of the funding, the myth of the ban, and the risk of the waivers. I want to close with some practical, do this right now advice. If I'm listening to this and I'm on a J-1, what is the very first thing I should look at?
Go get your passport and your DS 2019 form. That's the piece of paper that authorizes your J-1.
Okay, I've got them. What am I looking for?
Look at the visa stamp in your passport. Usually down in the bottom left corner, there's a little annotation. It will literally say either bearer is not subject to Section 212E or bearer is subject to Section 212E. Simple enough? If it says subject, I'm in trouble. If it says not subject, I'm good. Bought the champagne.
Stop right there. Put the champagne down. That is the final trap.
Of course it is. Nothing is simple with immigration.
Do not trust this stamp.
Why? It's a government stamp. It's literally in my passport.
It is a stamp put there by a consular officer at an embassy window who had about 90 seconds to review your file between interviews. They make mistakes all the time.
Really?
We see cases where the stamp says subject, but the person is actually free because of the new 2024 skills list update. We see cases where it says not subject, but the person actually had government funding and is definitely trapped.
So the stamp is just an opinion.
It's a preliminary opinion. It is not the law. It is not binding.
So how do I get the truth? The absolute final word.
You request an advisory opinion.
An advisory opinion. Explain that process.
This is a formal process where you send your documents to the Waiver Review Division at the Department of State in Washington. You send copies of all your DS 2019s, your passport, and a specific request form.
And what do?
They do a deep dive. They look at your CIP code. They look at the skills list history. They look at your funding source. And they issue a formal letter called an advisory opinion finding.
And that letter overrides the stamp.
That letter is the golden ticket. If your passport says subject, but the advisory opinion says not subject, you win. You take that letter to USCIS, and they accept it.
So don't panic if you see the stamp, and don't celebrate if you don't see it. Get the advisory opinion.
Exactly. Verify, verify, verify. Especially with the confusion around the 2024 updates. A lot of people have stamps from 2023 saying that are subject, but the law changed in 2024. The stamp is outdated. You need the advisory opinion to prove you are free.
Wow. It really is a maze, but I think we've found a path through it today for you listeners.
It is a maze, but it's one you can navigate if you know the rules.
So let's recap the big takeaways for you.
Number 1, the December 2024 skills list change is real, and it is retroactive. If you are from Saudi Arabia, India, Brazil, or the other removed countries, check your status. You might be free right now and not even know it.
Number 2, government funding and medical training remain the sticky handcuffs. If you have those, especially that indirect funding we talked about, the skills list change doesn't help you. You are looking at a waiver or the 2-year home residency.
Number 3, being subject bans work visas and green cards, not entry. You can still visit. You can still study. And if you choose to serve the time, you can do it in aggregate. Just keep your boarding passes.
And finally, waivers are powerful, but they freeze your status. Don't pull that lever until you are ready for the consequences and have a bridge to your next visa.
That's the summary. Strategy over panic.
You know, it makes me think, we have this incredible system designed to bring the world's brightest minds to the U.S. We want them here, but then we create this legal minefield that forces them to spend half their energy just figuring out how to stay and contribute. It's incredibly complex.
It is. It forces talented people to become amateur lawyers just to do their jobs. But that's the nature of the beast. The rules are the rules until they change, like they did in 2024.
Well, if you thought today was complicated, wait until tomorrow. We are leaving the world of J-1s and diving into the deep end of the H-1B.
Oh, yes, the H-1B revolution.
We're going to be talking about the new wage-weighted lottery of 2026. If you think the golden handcuffs were intense, wait until you see how the lottery has changed to favor the highest bidders.
It's a whole new game, a ruthless one.
We will have all the details right here. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. I'm your host, signing off.
See you next time.